You must master at the outset a simple but unalterable fact in modern relations between nations. When peace has been broken anywhere, the peace of all countries everywhere is in danger. It is easy for you and for me to shrug our shoulders and say that conflicts taking place thousands of miles from the continental United States, and indeed thousands of miles from the whole American hemisphere, do not seriously affect the Americas, and that all the United States has to do is to ignore them and go about its own business. Passionately though we may desire detachment, we are forced to realize that every word that comes through the air, every ship that sails the sea, every battle that is fought, does affect the American future. Let no man or woman, thoughtlessly or falsely, talk of America sending its armies to European fields. At this moment, there is being prepared a proclamation of American neutrality. This would have been done even if there had been no neutrality statute on the books, for this proclamation is in accordance with international law and in accordance with American policy. This will be followed by a proclamation required by the existing Neutrality Act. And I trust that in the days to come, our neutrality can be made a true neutrality. It is of the utmost importance that the people of this country, with the best information in the world, think things through. The most dangerous enemies of American peace are those who, without well-rounded information on the whole broad subject of the past, the present, and the future, undertake to speak with assumed authority, to talk in terms of glittering generalities, to give to the nation assurances or prophecies which are of little present or future value. I myself cannot and do not prophesy the course of events abroad. And the reason is that because I have of necessity such a complete picture of what is going on in every part of the world that I do not dare to do so. And the other reason is that I think it is honest for me to be honest with the people of the United States. I cannot prophesy the immediate economic effect of this new war on our nation, but I do say that no American has the moral right to profiteer at the expense either of his fellow citizens or of the men, the women, and the children who are living and dying in the midst of war in Europe. Some things we do know. Most of us in the United States believe in spiritual values. Most of us, regardless of what church we belong to, believe in the spirit of the New Testament, a great teaching which opposes itself to the use of force, of armed force, of marching armies and falling bombs. The overwhelming masses of our people seek peace, peace at home, and the kind of peace in other lands which will not jeopardize our peace at home. We have certain
Baruch Hashem, and welcome again to the ben-Emmett YouTube channel. I'm dressed down today in business attire. This is what I usually wear to work, yeah, to keep on everything else and pay out the beard and all that stuff, okay? Anyway, this is the Torah Watchman channel, so welcome into my home again. I am so gratified that you have taken your time and effort to pay attention to this important informational video. This is a Torah Watchman edition. The title of this Torah Watchman is The greatest anti-Semitic president in U.S. history. Wow, that's a mouthful, right? And who am I talking about? Okay? You might think I'm talking about President Donald J. Trump when you hear from other people on the other side of the coin, right? I'm going to try my best not to be political. I'm going to try to be apolitical and be more historical in concept. Remember, among other things, the Torah Watchman in our content is all things Judaism. Definitely teaching and preaching the Torah. Talking about our oral tradition passed down from our sages of blessed memory as codified in the Talmud and other things of that nature. Again, my target audience is anyone that wants to hear the inconvenient truth, and that's what I'm addressing today. Let's get started since our time is short. History. Everyone likes history, and this is American history, and something is not talked about enough. To give you in context, this past April we had HaMashoah, we had International Remembrance Day. What is that? Of course, we're talking about the 6 million that were butchered by the Nazi Germans in the Holocaust, anywhere from 1940 late to 1941, all the way to 1944 until the war ended, essentially. Okay? And who was president during that time? No other than Mr. New Deal. Yes, I'm talking about President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Yes, there were some bills that were passed through the Democratic control, primarily House of Representatives and the Senate back in the 1930s, and that's what I'm talking about. President Roosevelt became president around May 1933 all the way to 1945, like I said, to the end of the war, World War II. So there's some milestone dates I want you to try to remember. Please take note of this, okay? This is very important because I'm talking about something that should have never happened in America. Something should have never happened in America did happen. If we don't learn from our mistakes in our history, some people have this cancel culture mentality where our history is so hateful and so horrible, it makes me feel so horrible inside, it makes me cry, that I want to tear down every single landmark, every single statue, tear down every single memorial plate or whatever that reminds me of that awful history and dark chapter of America. Yes, America has grown, has adapted, has evolved to a point where we will help out anyone in need at this point. But it was not always that way in the 1930s, okay? Listen, World War I was a horrific war. Okay, millions and millions of people died. You know, probably more people died in World War I than any other war. But anyway, what led the bad decisions that made World War I so horrific, the way we ended that war, began the inevitable rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany, which dominated the entire European theater, you know, and World War II. Okay, back to some dates in America. Let's rewind the clock quite a bit to the 1930s again. Now make sure my dates are correct, okay? In February of 1939, there was a congressional bill. It was about the plight of Jewish refugee children, okay? Now this bill was passed by Senator Robert Wagner, Democrat of New York, and Representative Edith Rogers, Republican of Massachusetts. Members of Congress introduced a bill that would allow 20,000 German Jewish children to come to the U.S. as orphans over and above the annual quota for German immigrants. Understand something. Yes, the Jews that lived in Germany at that time were citizens of that country, okay? I don't have to explain all the history of the diaspora or the exile of Jews from country to country. We've been running from our enemies for thousands of years, just trying to survive and trying to find a home and make that new home, a new host nation like Germany, a better place for everyone to live in. The Jews had nothing against their fellow Germans or their fellow Poles or anyone or the French or anyone else, Swedes or whoever that lived around them, or those people in England and United Kingdom. We just wanted to live as Jews in that host nation peaceably without interfering in anyone else's freedom of choice, okay? We want to be left alone. But it didn't end that way. You know the horrific, horrible thing about 6 million Jews being butchered. This is how it started in America, okay? Again, this is not HaMashoah. This is not International Remembrance Day. And this is not the memorial on December 7th of Pearl Harbor Day either. I will get to that too. So in February 1939, I already told you about a bill that was passed through both houses of Congress and Senate, but it eventually was rejected. And this is for Jewish refugee children. Now, I know what you're saying if you're on the liberal side of there. And listen, you're all welcome. God bless you. Democrat, Independent, Republican. I'm trying not to be political here, okay? When President Trump first became president of the United States, he started fighting the war against ISIS, okay? There were 6 or 7 countries that had unstable, unrecognizable governments, essentially. They went back to the Bowman administration, okay? And they were considered as high threat for immigration into America, okay? In other words, there was no way to vet their intent. And most of these people were Syrian refugees. You heard about happened in Syria. About almost 500,000 people died in that horrible civil war between Sunni and Shia. Don't want to get into too much detail over there. Anyway, we blocked, temporarily at least, certain nations like Iraq, Iran, North Korea, certain African nations too. Yes, they were dominated by Muslims, but at that time, ISIS was all Muslim, and Al-Qaeda was all Muslim. Remember 9/11? Yes, I do, the 19 hijackers. They were all Muslim. Not all Muslims are bad, and not all Muslims are terrorists. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying Donald Trump took a lot of heat for implementing nations that the Obama administration recommended that were too high-risk security posture by the CIA, the FBI, Department of State, to allow them to come here without some sort of paperwork, okay? So anyway, that's happened recently, and Trump took a lot of heat for that. Whether he was wrong or right, well, who knows? You know what happened in Germany and Merkel ordering all European nations allow all the Syrian refugees in. You know what happened to those nations, okay? This is not my opinion. You can turn on the TV, you can look in a magazine, National Geographic, Time magazine, whatever. You want to Google it or whatever. You can see what the outcome of that was. Unvetted immigration. Now, what I'm talking about is Jewish children. 20,000 of these children were rejected by the United States of America. You know Ellis Island. You know about how Statue of Liberty, welcoming arms, all immigrants, okay? Now, these children were not undocumented immigrants. They had paperwork. They had birth certificates. They had something equal to a passport or a visa or something like that that was used during the 1930s. But anyway, they were rejected, and there was a lot of committees debating all of this. Again, this was during the time of the FDR, okay? A star actress, Helen Hayes, testified before the committee and promised to adopt a refugee herself. Some people promised, I will adopt this child myself. Again, these are children whose parents were lost in war, that were taken to detainee camps, or parents that willfully gave up their children because they knew that they would die if they were left there, especially Germany. Okay? So the bill passed out of the subcommittee unanimously, but it was rejected eventually, okay? Because America at this time was a big isolationist nation, okay? FDR passed a New Deal after the Great Depression, and a lot of people said it saved America's economy and gave us a reboot, whatever. Hindsight is 20/20, but you know, we benefited from Social Security, we benefit from unemployment insurance and compensation. These are unfunded entitlements. It is what it is. But anyway, it drew out the Depression into a horrible, horrible situation. It actually took World War II to wake us up from our economic misery. Something that FDR and a lot of the isolationists that were predominantly Democrats, I'm sorry, and yes, some Republicans and independents too, predominantly in America, they voted for neutrality. And I'll get to that in a moment. But there was America First attitude back then too, okay? But the mantra was not Republican, it was Democrat, okay? Don't want to get too much into political here. The wife of U.S. Immigration Commissioner, who also happened to be the cousin of President Roosevelt, said this. She testified that these 20,000 charming children, they're so sweet, all children are sweet and innocent, right? Would all too soon grow up into 20,000 ugly adults that we would have to deal with. Oh, did she say that? Yes, she did. Yes, she did. Well, and if that wasn't horrible enough, you know, turning America, the Statue of Liberty, turning their arms away from real war refugee children, okay, that had no terrorist intent, and, you know, the adults were turned away because Roosevelt and other people that supported his administration at the time accused him of being Nazi spies and sympathizers, okay. But anyway, on May 13th, 1939, 935 people, all of them German Jews, okay. This is where the Holocaust started in Germany, okay. That's when it first started, okay. They set sail from Hamburg, Germany, called the St. Louis. You can look it up, okay. What happened to the St. Louis? This big passenger boat, children and adults were packed in there like sardines, okay. It was inhumane. But I don't know who leased the ship or how they got the ship or some humanitarian thing. I don't know. But all these Jews, 935 people total, was on a ship sailing to the United States. Okay, so they didn't have any options in Europe. So they docked in Antwerp, Belgium, in June 17. Several Jewish organizations had secured visas for them. Okay, Jews helped themselves. Okay. So there was probably some wealthy people that contributed to that, whatever. So they traveled to the United States. They got stuck in Havana, Cuba. They went back and forth, back and forth. They were interviewed a few people, and then they just later denied them. Now, at some point, the U.S. literally turned a ship of 900 German Jews away, like I said before. They allowed 20,000 Jewish children to come to the U.S. safely. So after these Jewish children were rejected initially, all this was going on. This ship was parked in Havana, Cuba, waiting. So they allowed the children eventually to come, okay? So, but the rest of the people, they had to sit and wait. So at this time, the U.S. did not know how terrible the Holocaust was. Really? They did not know it. Okay, they had war movies at that time. I mean, war informational movies, everything you watch, Clark Gable, whatever you watched back was popular in the 30s and 40s. You saw war footages of soldiers and all the horrors in the war, and all these countries being taken over by the evil Red Army, Russian Red Army, Soviet Union, and all of this. Let them fight it out. It's none of our business, right? We don't want to get involved, okay? But many Americans had been alarmed about what happened at the Kristallnacht in 1938. And President Roosevelt had issued a statement condemning it. Now, Roosevelt was very good at condemning violence. Yeah, he's very, very good in condemning violence, and he wanted world peace. Where have we heard that before? In the last administration? Yes, we heard that before, okay? But anyway, America didn't feel strong enough at that time for the mistreatment of the Jews to allow them to have safe harbor. Listen, there were many more Jews. They were afraid of that slippery slope, that dripping pipe right there, that if you allowed several hundred Jews in, oh, the Jews would come to America. There were already Jews, patriotic American Jewish citizens in America. They probably had relatives in Germany and elsewhere during that time. They were listening to radios in Germany and France and Poland. They were listening literally to radios. What FDR would decide to do? What does it say in Bereshit about you who bless Israel will be blessed. Those that curse Israel will be cursed, right? It says that several times. But wrapping this all up here, okay, hindsight's 2020. But so many Democrats and other people that are not Democrat, whatever, believe FDR was the greatest president of all time since George Washington. In fact, many people want to mirror after FDR his policies. Folks, his policies ultimately led to the Pearl Harbor attack in December 1941, I believe. Yeah, December 1941. December 7th, 1941. About, 1,500, 1,300 people lost their lives. Naval sailors are on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean today that lost their lives because the Japanese allied themselves to Nazi Germany. FDR told America, this is not our affair. We're protected by these oceans. Protectionism, heard that? So we chose at that time in the 1930s, 1939, leading up to the horrible Holocaust. My daughter's second great-grandparents were butchered and murdered by Ukrainian sympathizers with SS Nazi soldiers, okay, in 1941. It's personal to me, and it's personal to a lot of people. Why am I talking about this now and not Hamashoah? Because some things require critical mass, okay, before you start talking about it. It works in your heart and soul, and I wake up every morning, FDR, FDR, FDR. Why? Hashem wants me to give this message to you. This does not put money in my bank. This does not give me a promotion at work. This does not do anything like that for me. It doesn't give me gold and silver. What it does, it elevates my soul and gets my heart passionate about these things that we should never get involved in this again. Okay? I'm not advocating for unvetted illegal immigration from Mexico, from Latin America to come into our country. There's a legal way to come in our country. But when you are legitimately war refugee, especially Jewish children, especially, the growth of anti-Semitism, we heard it there in Europe. We saw it on the winds. It was there. We were not ignorant. We were very educated in America, but we were not empathetic. You understand the difference? Listen, whatever, there's a lot of craziness happening in our country today. Our cities are burning, and the rioting and thugs and criminality and targeting police officers and everything else. Anti-Semitism is growing, folks, at the same level it was in the 30s, not just in America, but throughout the world. I'm warning you. I'm a watchman at the gates, at the tower, warning you that this will happen again if we don't learn from our mistakes, okay? So when you go to sleep and you hug up to your picture, signed photograph of Eleanor Roosevelt, and you think about the glory days of FDR or whatever that your grandparents told you about, and you wish FDR was resurrected from the dead so you could have him all over again. He was the greatest anti-Semite as a president of the United States in U.S. history. Yes, he saw the problem, did nothing about it, and said it's not our responsibility to get involved over there when innocent people are being targeted for no other reason because they're born Jewish, because their noses are the wrong size, because they wear kippahs and peyot and kapote and clothes and garments that make them uniquely Jewish and God-chosen people. We don't want to get involved in any of that. So when you think about the Holocaust and we say never again, remember, it happened in the administration of the FDR. I'm not going to say Baruch Hashem to that. I'm going to say obey. Click like, click subscribe, click personal notify, please. Please let me know how you enjoyed this video. Leave your comments. When I go premiere on this, you can leave live comments and I will be there on a limited time. Take care of yourself and God bless you.
Philosophies of force were to encompass the other continents and invade our own. We, no more than other nations, can afford to be surrounded by
chairman of the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, and one of the minority leaders of the House is with us now. Mr. Ditter? I read that.
We're at a fateful hour in the history of the American people. Every member of Congress is conscious of that fact. Our deliberations in this session of the Congress may determine whether we follow positively and aggressively the constructive pursuits of peace or allow ourselves to be drawn into the consuming inferno of war. Before such a challenge, affecting the destiny of 130 million people, all thought of partisanship gives way to the deepest impulses of patriotism. The heart of America cries aloud for peace. Only calm thinking and deep Americanism will enable us to see clearly through the bellowing fog of alien propaganda to the clear path of national interest. The greatest service, as I see it, that America can render to the world is to keep aglow the beacon light of liberal, constitutional government. That light is the hope, and the only hope, I might say, of the world today. At this time, we should support wholeheartedly the President's plea for a unity of purpose. And I feel that that unity of purpose can best be expressed in his own words when he said, and I quote, "Despite what happens in continents overseas, the United States of America shall and must remain. As long ago the father of our country prayed that it might remain, unentangled and free. And it's in this spirit that the House of Representatives, Republican and Democrat, convened today to try to solve the great and perplexing problem."
Thank you, Mr. Ditter. We've just heard from Speaker Bankhead of the House of Representatives and Representative Ditter, Chairman of the Republican Congressional